What is going on, everybody? With the 2026 NFL Draft in the rear view mirror, it is time to break down how these teams did in the draft, how these players fit with their new teams, and of course, talk about how these teams managed to find value in the draft, and ultimately handing out the ever-controversial draft grades. And you know, every year I get comments complaining about draft grades, that they're useless. And I'm, of course, not here to tell you with certainty how every single player is going to turn out. Just like your team's GM, I know I'm not going to be perfect with my own evaluations. But I am here to tell you, based on my own months of preparation for the draft and the grades I have on these players, who I do think maybe did reach on a player that I'm maybe not betting so much on, or inversely, who I think found total steals further down the board. This is always one of my favorite exercises every single year, so much so that I've actually created a grading criteria for these draft report cards. This is so that I can keep these grades consistent from team to team, and today we'll be breaking down the NFC East. And as we get started, if you could do me a huge little favor, and please do hit that like button down below. It's a free and easy thing that really does go a long way towards pushing this video out towards other draft sickos just like you. And if you do, a little football animation is even going to show up on your screen, which is fun. And make sure you subscribe as well so you do not miss any of my draft grades videos. And I'm even going to be revisiting my 2023 draft grades to see how my takes aged from 3 years ago with that class. So you're not going to want to miss that. And I also want to thank Prize Picks for sponsoring today's video. We'll hear more from them in a little bit. And we'll begin things with the Washington Commanders, who begin their draft with the 7th pick, selecting Sonny Styles, linebacker out of Ohio State. Now, I think Sonny Styles is a really, really good linebacker prospect, but I'm going to give this a B grade. Again, still a very good pick, but I am going to question the positional value at the spot here, and I know people are going to say, who cares? Look at the testing profile. This guy's the next Fred Warner. Well, I've been all on about this throughout draft season. The odds of him becoming Fred Warner are still pretty thin, though that is his theoretical upside. With his ridiculous athletic ability, I will stand on what I've said about Sonny Styles, in that when you watch Ohio State games, it's not like offenses are terrified of this guy or he's taking over games. And to be honest, that's also just kind of the nature of the linebacker position and why I bring up positional value here. I would say Fred Warner is the one linebacker in the NFL that does week in, week out sway games from this position group. So you really do need a best case scenario from Sonny Styles if you're going to draft him here, and that's just a lot to wager. I said the same thing about when the Lions took Jahmyr Gibbs. It's like, if this is going to work, it needs to be a best case scenario, and it worked out for them. So hopefully you can turn Sonny Styles into a linebacker the level of Fred Warner. But I do think the just better overall approach from Washington, if this was me picking, I think Ruben Bain, Mekhi Lemon, even Caleb Downs, all would have been better picks. Downs, yes, you can bring up positional value of safety, but I think Downs was just a better overall prospect, in my opinion. Ruben Bain, I mean, we can't sit here and be like, oh my God, the Bucs got the best player in the draft at 15 without bringing up some of the teams that I think probably should have taken him instead. We know how much of a bigger difference a pass rusher like that can make than a linebacker. We see them getting paid about 2.5 times what the top linebackers get for a reason. Mekhi Lemon ends up going to the Eagles. These wide receivers are making $40 million, and we'll talk about the next pick that they made being an Antonio Williams. The Commanders need an impact at wide receiver, especially if Terry McLaurin struggles to stay out there on the field as he gets older. But yeah, man, I think it's a good pick in Sonny Styles. He's a tremendous linebacker prospect. My number one linebacker. It's still a B-graded pick. I'm not here to roast the Commanders for it. But I do think there were other picks that would have been more impactful positions to go with and even better players to go with at positions of need for this team. So it was a B-graded pick for me. Now, I do want to spend a little bit more time on Sonny Styles, the player, and how he fits in here. I don't want to just obsess about the nuances of why I gave the grade I gave. That has been laid out there, but I want to at least talk about Styles, the player, a little bit because he is exciting. I mean, the athletic profile absolutely speaks for itself. There's a lot of flashes when things do click for him, and he does take on blocks in between the tackles, and you're like, all right, if we can get that at a consistent level, this dude, I mean, as critical as I was at points, I do think he has the highest upside of any player in this draft, because that testing profile, the way he moves on the field, it's not of this earth. But some of the criticisms I did have on him is I do think his run diagnostics still have a ways to go. You watch the first half of that Michigan game, if you want to see what I'm talking about. You see him late to diagnose things, late to scrape over the top. I think he needs to be much more consistent in his block take-on abilities, still continue to develop some of that zone coverage. So, that's typical for most young linebacker prospects. Styles is just in the second year for himself playing this position after converting from safety. And I do think he can get there with all of those things, but I think it could take a couple years until we're talking about Sonny Styles as kind of like a top 5, top 10 linebacker in the league. He's, in my opinion, I would expect him to go through some learning curves early on. But to end on a positive note here, I will say he makes sense for the Commanders in this sense that watching their defense last year, they felt very slow. Like a lot of run after catch, a lot of big plays in that sense. Teams were really able to attack Bobby Wagner in the middle of the field, a safety room that couldn't get to the ball on time. Like Sonny Styles, for all of the critiques I have about it, he's going to have that sideline to sideline speed and help limit some of those big plays and certainly make this feel like a faster, younger defense. So I do like the pick. It gets a B grade for me. Not quite going to go up to an A like I think a lot of people might expect for this one, just from a positional value standpoint there, but really good player. We got to fast forward now to the third round, and I will remind people, I said this in the NFC North video, but we are grading the process of what picks these teams had heading into draft weekend, not the overall haul. So just keep that in mind as you see the final grade there. Like obviously the Commanders' overall haul is going to look a little bit less because they didn't have that high second round pick there. We're more grading the overall process of what they had. If the draft was their test, whatever picks they had to do right by those picks. That's how we're looking at this thing. But Antonio Williams at the top of the third round, I don't think Williams is a bad player, and I will say I liked this pick better than when they spent a third-round pick on Luke McCaffrey. To all the draft grades don't matter crowd out there, I hated that pick, and that has not worked out as a third-round pick. I think Antonio Williams has a much better path to becoming, honestly, my highest upside kind of idea of Antonio Williams when I watched him was something like Jamison Crowder. He's a little bit bigger, but that idea of like a really good slot wide receiver, he was a little bit further down the board for me because I really thought there was a ton of players in this wide receiver class that I fell in love with. So from, the idea that I do think there was a lot of better wide receivers out there. I don't know that Antonio Williams is the highest impact player. This is going to land at a C grade for me from a value perspective on still a top 75 pick here. But that said, I think when you look at this room and there being an opportunity for someone like Antonio Williams to step in and win a starting slot job right away, where he's got good hands, he's a good route runner. I just don't think, he's not the biggest guy, he's not the most dynamic athlete after the catch. He's just a very sound, solid slot wide receiver. And for me, that's more of a early, like top of day 3 kind of guy. They took him about a round and a half early, in my opinion. So a C grade there. Then we get to day 3, and I do think they got some value back here. Joshua Josephs out of Tennessee, played a part of that deep rotation at Tennessee. Smaller guy. I don't expect he's ever really going to emerge as a full-time starter for you, but I do think he's got a lot of juice. Ironically, my pro comp on him is Kayvon Chason. As a designated pass rusher type of role, the Commanders brought in Chason, so maybe a little bit of a mentor and a role projection for him long-term in this offense on a cheap 4-year deal. But yeah, he's got a bunch of different moves that he showed off at times in a rotational role in that hockey line approach that Tennessee has, which can be frustrating for evaluators at times. But I charted down him with a speed rush, a bull rush, a euro swipe, cross chop, spin move, push, pull, swim. He's got it all in the bag. And in a designated pass rush role with some twitch, I think he can be a guy that comes off the bench. Not dissimilar as well from what Jacob Martin was able to do for this team. I think Commanders fans would admit he was pretty underrated last year. So you get another one of those guys in the 5th round. I think that's a great pick. I, even at the end of the 3rd round, would have considered Josh Josephs. And then at the top of the 6th round, they take Kaytron Allen, the running back out of Penn State. I like this as a fit. They now have a bunch of dudes in this running back room. It'll be curious to see who makes the team. Rachaad White, Bill Merritt, Jerome Ford, Jeremy McNichols has been underrated on this team, and now Kaytron Allen. So he's going to have to, show up to win this job. But in a horrible running back class, he was actually my RB4, and I painted him as a really high floor, low ceiling back, someone that can maybe be a spot starter in the league. Doesn't break a ton of tackles, not the fastest guy, not the biggest guy, but excellent vision, just a steady runner. I think long term, Bill Merritt and Kaytron Allen would make a lot of sense. Bill Merritt is a ton of fun, but he's got some vision questions. He's had some fumbles. If you want to close out games, or if you've got a 3rd and 3 that you really you want to block it up well and make sure the running back sees the hole and gets you enough yardage on a well-blocked run, I think Kaytron Allen can be that. So I do think this was a really plus value at the 6th round there, especially in this running back class where there just weren't a whole lot of guys worth a whole lot, in my opinion. Allen was one of those guys worth something. Then I like the Matt Goldman pick at the end of the 6th round. Definitely saw him mid to early day 3 as immediate backup center. But someone kind of like Tyler Biadasz was, with this team, with the Cowboys before them, someone that doesn't have a whole lot of plus traits for the O-line position, but he's smart, he's experienced, and I wouldn't be stunned if within this rookie contract, he eventually climbs up and becomes this team's starting center. I had a 5th round grade on him, and I think that was, it's far from a given that he does that, but I think it was a good pick to get a 5th round graded player at the end of the 6th round. And then I could not believe my eyes when I saw the name Ethan Kaliakmanis come up across my screen. I am a Minnesota Golden Gophers fan, where Kaliakmanis began his career, and because of what I had seen with him with the Gophers, I didn't make time to watch his Rutgers tape. I did not think he would get drafted. I know that he has really turned a corner and started to develop in a way that he did not at Minnesota. So, hey, I'm really happy for him that he got to hear his name called here. He does have a very strong arm. So that is always going to be worth developing. I figure probably as a QB3, role on this team for now, as they do still have Marcus Mariota. But hey, good for him. I would still say, man, Garrett Nussmeier was there. I see too much value there to not take a Nussmeier over an Ethan Kaliakmanis. I just think that's worth calling out. It's not going to destroy the grade here or anything. It hardly plays a factor, but I definitely think even with the LSU connection there, is kind of fun with Daniels and Nussmeier. If Daniels is going to maybe be someone that gets a little bit banged up, having a really good quality backup like a Nussmeier on the cheap for the next 4 years. I don't know how long Marcus Mariota is going to be able to do that for them. I think that would have been a better use of that pick, but not the end of the world. And then we do shout out undrafted free agent steals for all these teams as well. Just guys that I watched or that stood out to me. And Robert Henry out of UTSA, he had a bunch of long runs against that level of competition. He's a fun highlight reel to watch. Now, I don't know necessarily as he makes the jump to the NFL that his play style is really going to lead to a whole lot, because I don't know that he has that same breakaway speed against NFL competition. I would certainly bet against it. And I don't know that he had too much other than just managing to get into the 3rd level of the defense and pull away. But the production, you can't really deny it. And for an undrafted pickup, why not? But he is going to have his hands full trying to crack this roster with now 5 running backs worth something on this team. But I ended up going to the B- on the Washington Commanders draft. Don't need to rehash the Sonny Styles thing. I think they probably could have gotten more from what they got at the 3rd round. But they did some good stuff on day 3. Finding value, finding role players. Maybe Goldman turns into a center. Worth finding that out. So there you have it. B- for the Washington Commanders. Before we go any further, I want to thank the sponsor for today's show, Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. On Prize Picks, they have an easy-to-use app where you have a chance and win some money, stringing together lineups where you'll pick any number of player stats, picking more or less on all the sports, all the stats. So whether it's football, picking touchdowns and passing yards, baseball, strikeouts, hockey, you get the point. They have so many options on Prize Picks. They even have team picks now where you can pick the winner, the spread, and totals on any major game. And that's available in most states, including Texas, California, and Florida. And one thing Prize Picks has that I'm excited about is you can follow my handle at TFG_football and follow along with all of my picks throughout the summer. I'll be putting together baseball lineups. I have really reestablished my love of the game of baseball, something that goes way back to when I was just a puppy. But having Prize Picks lineups to give you a little rooting interest and a chance to win some extra money is something I have really enjoyed as the baseball season has already begun. And we're going to be diving deep into the stats and trying to pick some winners when football season rolls around. So when you sign up, Prize Picks will give you $50 in bonus lineups. It's going to be code HMA when you do sign up, or click that link in the description below. So thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's show, and let's get back to it. Let's talk Dallas Cowboys now. They began their draft moving up one spot, not giving up too much to do that, to secure one of the better players in this entire draft, Caleb Downs, the safety out of Ohio State. I think that will be fun to track. I talk about draft rivalries all the time. These little moments in the draft, sliding doors moments between either prospects at the same position that went with a similar range, or moments like this where you have a division rival, out of the same school, out of Ohio State. The Cowboys end up with Caleb Downs, who I said would have been a better pick for Washington. So always fun to track those takes. It's at the end of the day, that's what makes these draft grades so fun. But this gets an A+ for me. Caleb Downs was a top 5 player in this draft, is a perfect scheme fit as well as Dallas makes this change to a Fangio-style split safety defense. Caleb Downs is built to do that. He can realistically play anywhere, but he doesn't really have the true speed of an ideal, center fielding free safety. He doesn't have the true size of a typical, big box safety. Again, he can do both those things really well. It's part of what made him such a special prospect. However, where he's best is playing quarters coverage, using his anticipation and elite IQ from the back end to jump digs and posts and all the stuff in the middle of the field. He's got oily hips to turn and run with enough speed to take that stuff away from those split safety assignments. He's got a great processor to come downhill and fill the run from those spots. You can make a very strong argument that in a Fangio or McDonald style defense, a safety like this is actually even more valuable than the outside cornerback position. And to get that player at the 11th pick in the draft, I like coming up to secure him because I'm sure Miami was getting plenty of phone calls. So you just move up that one spot, get her done. This is an A+ pick for me for the Dallas Cowboys, getting one of the better players in this entire draft at 11, in my opinion. But then with the next pick, I'm going to be honest, I don't love what the Cowboys did here. It was honestly one of my least favorite things that a team did in the first round of the draft. I think for the most part, teams did a really good job on the first round of the draft, so that's worth noting. But there's just a handful of things about this pick that made me land on a C. Number one, the player is just a little bit early. Without some of the other things I'm going to bring up, I think you could sell me on Malachi Lawrence at 23 a little bit more. And to be fair, they did trade down, collected a pair of 4th-round picks, and then took the guys. So if you're going to reach a little bit, it is good process to trade down. So I will give them some love back for that. However, they traded down with the opportunity to take who, in my opinion, would have been a much better pick for the Cowboys, and that is Akeem Mesidor out of Miami, my number 2 edge rusher in this draft. They end up moving down and getting the number 9 edge rusher in this draft in Malachi Lawrence, who I think has upside. Played at a lower level of competition, kind of showed a lot of different moves. He's got some pop in his hands. He's got some finesse-style moves. He's got the cross chop. I compare him to Odafe Owe, who went right around this range in the first round and wasn't the best of picks for what he was for Baltimore. I think, a true number 2 kind of edge rusher. It's a little bit of a harder sell in the mid to late first round range. You want a legitimate number 1 kind of guy. I think, especially if there's one on the board, I think Akeem Mesidor is going to be that for the Chargers. So that's just my take on that. But on top of this, you trade down with the Eagles, letting them get Mekhi Lemon, one of the steals of the draft. And it came out that the Steelers were on the phone about to take Mekhi Lemon. So you kind of gifted that to a division rival. Don't love that about it. So just the combination of it being a little bit early, trading with the Eagles to give them such a steal that was not going to make it to the Eagles a pick later, and passing up on Hakeem Mesidor, I landed on a C with that whole process. But Malachi Lawrence in his own right can still become a nice number 2 edge rusher. I liked, honestly, for example, Donovan Ezeraku more than Malachi Lawrence, and I think Ezeraku's like ideally like probably going to be a number 2 guy in the league. So kind of like getting a similar-ish kind of player guy at 23, it's just a tick early, but nice player. We'll see how he develops coming up from UCF to the NFL. And I know UCF's like in the Big 12 now, but it's not a whole lot of great offensive lines in that division, if we're being honest about it. But then you have to fast forward all the way to the end of the 3rd round. No 2nd round pick from the Quinnen Williams trade. They end up going with Jayshon Barham out of Michigan, and I do like this one. I gave this one an A for the value, kind of lined right up. And we're going to find out if they're going to use him as an edge or a linebacker. Michigan couldn't decide either if they wanted to use him as an edge or a linebacker. At some point, you want to pick one and develop it. I think he's got potential in both phases. He moves really well. He plays with his hair on fire. I would say he's kind of equally raw at both just because of the role. He did kind of play as that hybrid strong side backer at Michigan, did do a lot of rushing the passer. In a vacuum, I would prefer him as an edge just because it's a more valuable position. But as a late 3rd rounder, if you do view him as someone that can really take on blocks well and develop the zone IQ, and I do think he has the athleticism and the movement ability to turn into more of a full-size full-time linebacker with some size, I can get behind that as a process. I think he's just a moldable, athletic, like hard worker that has the potential to have a better pro career ahead of him than he did in college as just kind of a role player on a pretty loaded Michigan defense. So I like the pick. We'll see kind of which direction they go with him, but worth it in my opinion. Gave that pick an A. Then we get to day 3. They take Drew Shelton out of Penn State. This one borders between being a good pick and a great pick based on my criteria. It's not like a tremendous steal or anything like that. I had him right around this range, so we landed on good pick here, but I do really like the landing spot here, where I've been pretty harsh on the Cowboys pair of tackles. I think Tyler Guyton, it's a make or break year for him, who's had a lack of development there at left tackle, and Terrence Steele at right tackle's an excellent run blocker, but kind of gets Dak killed all the time. And I just don't know that either of them are your forever tackles. Drew Shelton was one of a select few kind of late 3rd, early 4th round tackles that I think does actually have the traits, the size, the movement ability, the length to potentially develop into actually like a starting tackle. And his tape was inconsistent, but I think still good enough to say like he's got what it takes to be a really good swing tackle in the NFL as well, and maybe even an interior player if they ever run into a need there with some injuries. But just a really good kind of moldable lineman prospect that it was well worth this pick right here. And then 2 picks later, they take Devin Moore, a towering corner out of Florida, whose tape was not bad. Anytime you have a corner this long, and Dallas has taken a few guys like this, and it's been mostly misses with guys that are 6'3", 6'4" at corner. But Devin Moore did kind of make it work and show that he can find the ball, show that he can play with anticipation, which can compensate for some of his slower feet. I did have him in this range, 4th to a 5th round. Not like someone I'd be like banging the drum for, like I swear this guy's going to turn to a starter in the league, but he is fascinating and I think worth seeing what he can do for you there in the middle of the 4th round. So it was a good pick there. And then LT Overton out of Alabama. I'm going to be honest, I didn't think we would arrive to draft day, and this would be a player that I would say I love the pick wherever he got drafted. But I kind of do, man. I think this is a great spot for him, and something that was something I noticed pretty late in the draft process, honestly, when I was finalizing my grades, putting in final measurables and test scores and stuff. LT Overton actually, after his combine, when he just was getting no buzz at all, he actually bulked up. He added about 10 to 15 pounds from his combine weight, went from 275 to close to 290, and seems to be making that transition to being an interior defensive lineman, which obviously after this team took Malachi Lawrence, they have a pretty deep edge room. Barham could be in the mix there. I think they view LT Overton as interior D-line depth, and I'm pretty optimistic that he can make that transition. He was never going to be a guy that had the twitch and pass rushing chops to be a consistent edge rusher, but with him bulking up, I could see him being a pretty nice, like, third D tackle to eat up some downs early on, get off blocks. I liked his run defense tape, and you're telling me you're going to put another 15 pounds on that guy? I kind of like that. So he ended up my number 10 interior defensive lineman at the end of the day, after I moved him from my edge group to the interior D-line with a third to a fourth round grade. So you get that at the end of the fourth round, and I wouldn't be stunned if he is automatically someone that plays a critical role for them. Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams are great, but we know with this Eagles system coming over, they very much value having D-line depth and guys that can eat up some dirty work for you. And hey, Overton actually has like a decent ability to kind of push guys back as well and compress the pocket occasionally on third down. So I really am behind this pick, despite being a guy that, you know, even early on in the draft process myself as well. But most people were just not very excited about LT Overton. But I like the reality check to become more of a D tackle. So hopefully that's all in motion here in Dallas and they don't get too cute with it. I think even get him up to like 290, 295 would be great. And then seventh round, they grab Anthony Smith. I didn't get to his tape, but he's kind of a vertical threat, which I do like the idea if you're pinpointing speed and a guy that, you know, had a high yards per reception in college. If you look at their wide receiver room, someone that's comfortable getting down the field with some speed would make sense, which they don't really have with their other existing depth. So I like that. And then they did have some undrafted free agent pickups as well with their pass catchers. Jordan Hudson was someone I really liked the tape, kind of slowly ended up lowering him a little bit throughout the draft process, goes from, my wide receiver 16 with a third to a fourth round grade. Just dipped him down a little bit more into that day 3 category, but someone I still like the tape on, someone I compared to Rashad Bateman that's just got really balanced tape. Don't love that he ran like a 4.58 at his pro day after not working out at the combine and just the complete and utter lack of buzz on him. I guess I chickened out a little bit, but I'll still shout him out as, you know, I absolutely would have taken a gamble on his tape, and he gets to stay close to home here out of SMU. And also staying close to home is Michael Trigg out of Baylor. I figured he would probably go undrafted just because there is a lot of off-field, just like accountability, maturity concerns with him that are very public. But this is the team that was able to find Des Bryant and like give him a babysitter and get him to mature at the next level. Maybe they can do something similar with Michael Trigg, who's just a brick shithouse of a tight end that has some pretty exciting plays on tape. So I wouldn't have been stunned if someone took a chance on him very late, but to bring him in undrafted, why not see what he can do with the potential of a pro career ahead of him now. So I ultimately went with a B grade on the Dallas Cowboys, which I think makes sense considering it was, little one hand good, one hand not so great with the first round, and then very nice picks down the board after that. So very good, solid B grade for Dallas. Let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, who did come up with Dallas and get Mekhi Lemon, one of the steals of the first round. We saw some major steals. I think Ruben Bain, Mekhi Lemon, and Dylan Thieneman, all top 10 players for me that went outside of the top 15, or Bain went 15. But yeah, just tremendous value. Insert your Howie Roseman can't keep getting away with it meme, and the fact that he steals them from Pittsburgh, who was on the phone with them at the time. Just incredible intel from Howie to know that Pittsburgh was going to be all over Mekhi Lemon inside that state. But yeah, I mean, this dude catches everything. He's tough as hell. He's, to me, some blend of Jackson Smith and Jigba, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I feel like people were really scared to compare Mekhi Lemon to those players who have become top 5, top 6 wide receivers in the league. Jackson Smith and Jigba, obviously, has a case for the best wide receiver in the NFL today. But look at who those guys were as prospects, right? My idiot ass was even too low on JSN, as the league was too low on him, letting him fall to 20. Amon-Ra St. Brown falls to the 4th round. Like, I have certainly had to reevaluate how I think about players like this. It's a zone-heavy league. You don't see press man coverage like you used to. The ability to attack zone coverage, to win tough catches in congested areas, the ability to be a run-after-catch weapon, it's more important than it ever was in the modern framework of the NFL. There's a reason that I would say 3 of the top, just to call it safe, 8 wide receivers in the NFL are in the same mold. Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Look, Mekhi Lemon is cut from the exact same cloth. It is dangerous to make pro comps like that, and I understand that, but I see all of the same DNA with this player and a chance to be that guy. Now, especially after we talk about Eli Stowers as the next pick, pressure's on Jalen Hurts here to utilize a player over the middle of the field, which has not been Jalen Hurts' strong suit, as they make this scheme change to more of a Shanahan-style offense, which obviously is a great fit for Mekhi Lemon in the areas of the field that he attacks. But the pick, the value, now the scheme fit, it is remarkable. And good on Howie Roseman for getting it done to go get Lemon. And then you take Eli Stowers at the end of the 2nd round, and I'm totally fine with this. I had a late 2nd, early 3rd round grade on him. He's a difference-making matchup problem as an F tight end, as a big slot wide receiver. I love him as in a Shanahan-style offense, especially a team that I think is going to want to run a lot more 12 personnel than they have run in previous systems. Off the wing, in the slot, as that matchup problem, not just like a one-on-one matchup problem, but the beauty of a guy like this is when you're out in 12 personnel, teams don't always know how to match you, because that second tight end, especially in Eli Stowers' case, he can block weak side backers and slot corners and safeties pretty well. He can't put his hand in the dirt and dig out defensive ends. I don't want Eli Stowers to ever be the Dallas Goedert replacement and be a full-time Y tight end here, but when teams are matching you in base, you have mismatch galore with Eli Stowers on a weak side backer or a safety. If they want to match you in nickel, you can have a little bit of that added blocking presence. So really good for the new scheme fit. They are leaning clearly into this Shanahan-style offense. And like I said, they are arming Jalen Hurts with no excuses in terms of the right schemed players. You have everything's going to be out there for you. It's going to be very clear whether or not Jalen Hurts can handle this transition, into the latter days of his big contract, as he's getting more expensive, and there's a lot of noise about that. But also just all the noise about the playbook and the scheme and, it's been a high school offense for Jalen Hurts. People saying, well, they're not giving him the opportunity to run the good stuff in the NFL, the pro style stuff. Well, here you go. You got it all. Now let's go see it. I'm keeping an open mind about it. Certainly hasn't been the parts of the field, though, that Hurts has thrived in the past. So we'll see how it all works in that light. But in terms of nailing great values and really good players for what they needed, 100% executed. Surprise, surprise, by Howie Roseman. Now, the Markel Bell pick at the very top of the 4th round, there's nothing wrong with it. I saw him as kind of late 3rd, more where like the Vikings got Caleb Tiernan. He was closer to 100 on my big board than he was to 75 for sure. I still think 3rd round, was reasonable for him, but this is 4th pick in the 3rd round for a guy that I don't think is going to be a starting tackle in the NFL. Maybe he surprises there. He's got crazy length, but I don't know that there's a ton to really develop with him, to be honest. He just doesn't have the best feet. He's not the best athlete, but kind of like what DeJuan Jones is for the Browns. Like, I think he could be a really nice backup, and if Lane Johnson, getting up there in age, gets banged up, I think you can plug him in there and not miss a beat in terms of, keeping Jalen Hurts upright and buying him time to throw it for the most part. But he's not unbeatable. as an offensive lineman either with those slower feet. So I had a hard time giving this an A in terms of value and everything, but did give it a B. It's still a very good pick. Just a tick early with the 66th pick in the draft that I think can still be made to find starters and like high-end impact guys. Like I don't think we look back on this and it's like, oh my God, how did they get Markel Bell at 66, But then they, I'll just put it up there just more to have a conversation about it. It's not going to factor too much into the grade, but maybe slightly. But they did trade for Jonathan Grenard on draft day. And while I'm not evaluating for example, the Commanders who didn't have a second round pick or the Packers who didn't have a first round pick, like we're evaluating what these teams had with the picks going into draft weekend. That is relevant when you trade the 98th pick and a third round pick next year for Jonathan Grenard. And I think with the 98th pick being damn near a fourth round pick, I mean, that is a compensatory pick and a team that is expecting to be winning. And it's probably going to be a pick around the 100th pick again next year for a number one edge rusher, someone that I think is even better than Jalen Phillips, who they were trying to pay. I think that's phenomenal. And he doesn't come with the injury history that Jalen Phillips has. So I think that was phenomenal execution and the trade. If I'm a Vikings fan, I'm pretty gutted by that. I would have much rather seen my team get at least one top 75 pick for Jonathan Grenard, or just pay him. And he's the type of guy that's, was a day 3 pick. He's bounced around a couple times. He's probably still going to end up underpaid for what he's going to produce for this team. So I really do love the Eagles being aggressive to go get a need filled there with that 98th pick. But then you go to day 3, they take a backup quarterback. This is what the Eagles do every single year. I don't think this is the forever replacement for Jalen Hurts. So I'm not going to have any hot takes about this or anything like that. But Peyton does have incredible upside. Once upon a time, the Eagles took a North Dakota State quarterback, and for a while, it was going pretty well for them with Carson Wentz. But yeah, Peyton's a 230-pound dude that can run. He's got a cannon arm. A lot of issues with his tape, man. I mean, he only started 1 year in that offense, but a lot of tunnel vision, a lot of bad throws, a lot of bad pocket presence. Like, there's a lot to clean up with him. I had a 5th round grade on him. They take him at the end of the 5th round, but you bring him in as a QB3, knowing that 2 years from now, I would say that it's unlikely that both Hurts and Tanner McKee are on this team. And if Cole Payton can develop, maybe you find a really quality backup with some really good athletic ability in there. End of the 6th round, they take someone that I just was not a fan of. He got some hype because of a good RAS score, but his tape is just not good. Micah Morris out of Georgia. I figured because of the size and the testing profile, sure, you want to draft him in the 7th round, and we are already into the late 6th round here. So there's nothing wrong with this from a process perspective. It's just certainly not a guy I would be betting on. I just didn't see a guy that had much of a mean streak or got off the ball or really wanted it in the run game, especially, and he wasn't a particularly good pass blocker. So they're going to have their hands full trying to get the most out of him and his physical ability. But then you go to the very end of the 7th round, they get Cole Wisniewski. Good value there. I had a 5th to a 6th round grade on him. He's got a hint of starting potential in there. He's not the best athlete. He's a big guy. I would say I was slightly disappointed for a bigger guy by some of the run defense stuff, but he does have instincts and ball skills and had a bunch of college interceptions on tape. So maybe he can surprise as a late 7th rounder, and he's going to have to make the team first, but there's opportunities for him to compete at safety here. There really are. So keep an eye out on him for sure. And then I'm actually going to pair this together. They take Uar Bernard out of Nigeria in the International Pathway Program, and then they were also able to wrangle in Joshua Weru. Same idea. These guys had a workout, I'm pretty sure, together, and just made headlines, man, with just unbelievable testing numbers. Just the how athletic these guys are, who have never played organized football. You get them into the the Eagles D-line development factory and see what can happen. And honestly, all the way down to like Keyshawn James as well. We can kind of lump that in there out of New Mexico. He's someone that tested really well as well. So it's kind of the same idea where it's like, hey, we got the opportunity to take a bunch of dart throws on guys with upside. I'm never going to fault a team for doing that. The probability of it working is lower, but this is the team that turned Jordan Mailata out of the same international pathway program into an all-pro left tackle, and you get bonus practice squad spots for these guys too. So just to get both of them into your building is a ton of fun. I love that as a process because it's literally no risk, all reward at the most important position on the field other than quarterback. So there's a reason the Eagles stay good on the D-line because they understand how to keep churning through, whether it's, okay, we actually need an immediate need. We need to address that and trade for Grenard now, but we got to make sure we got this pipeline of developmental guys still in the works here. So love that. I've got Daquan Wright as well as an undrafted free agent steal. Worth mentioning. Shades of like David Njoku with the run after catch ability that he has. Not much of a blocker, but I did think he was draftable and worth bringing in here, especially if you're going to be running more 12-13 personnel. And then Deontay Lawson played his college ball at Bama, was a decent linebacker prospect. I think could be depth in the NFL. Probably should have been drafted like later day 3. I don't know that there's a ton of upside with Lawson, but everybody needs linebacker depth and special teams contributors. I think he can do that for them, and I wouldn't be surprised if he makes this team. So the sky is blue, and the Philadelphia Eagles get an A draft grade for me. Very little to criticize here. Maybe a bit early for a swing tackle and Markel Bell, keeping them from an A+, but the Eagles are going to find themselves, once again, very high on our final list of draft grades here. And Howie Roseman just keeps getting away with it. But let's go to the New York Giants, who surprised everybody by taking Arvell Reese with the 5th pick in the draft. Has been a very fun pick to kind of analyze and project how this is all going to play out, where he's going to play. What does this mean for the existing edge players? They weren't able to work out a Kayvon Thibodeau trade during the draft, so we'll see what they want to do with him, with Brian Burns, who I have pointed out had... And this is where Giants fans get mad at me and I lose Giants fans and all that stuff. But it's true, and it's my honest opinion. Brian Burns is the biggest regression candidate in the NFL this year. He was voted on the All-Pro team last year, second-team All-Pro because of his sack numbers. But his pass rush win rate, his pressure rate was very low. And I shared out his sack highlight reel. 12 of those sacks were not him beating his guy. Now, Brian Burns is a very good player, but he's an athleticism-based edge rusher who will be 29 after this season. So what does this mean for his long-term future? I actually think it's self-aware of the Giants to be like, look, we love what Brian Burns is doing for us right now, but this might be as good as it gets for him. Now, even with that, I think we probably see Burns here for 1 or 2 more years, and it's just interesting, right? They took Abdul Carter last year. Thibodeau, I think it's, they will trade him as soon as they get what they're looking for him. And if they don't trade him, he'll be on his way out after this year. But what's unique about Arvell Reese, and what I really want to talk about here, as I am giving this an A grade, by the way, because he was, to me, the number 2 player in this draft. And you get him at number 5 at a valuable edge rush position. Now, there's a lot of talk about this, right? Giants fans may be even a little bit sensitive at times because it's like, wait, he's going to be a linebacker for us. Yes, in year 1, I think Arvell Reese has that unique ability to be a head-hunting north and south linebacker next to the experienced Tremaine Edmonds and be a blitzer and get after it and play run and chase football and the occasional zone drop, just as he did at Ohio State. He was really good at that at Ohio State, and I think there's absolutely a role in this defense to do that. This Ravens staff pretty much did the same thing with Patrick Queen, who generally has no idea what he's doing, but he can go run to the ball and hit people. I think Arvell Reese can absolutely play the Patrick Queen role in this Ravens-style defense. Now, I will say this. As I predicted on draft night, the Giants came out after the first night of the draft and said Arvell Reese was the number 1 player on our board. And I'm telling you right now, they did not have Arvell Reese as the number 1 player on their board as a linebacker prospect. His versatility to do that in year 1, because it's a crowded room that has to sort itself out over the next couple of years, is an extra reason to take him. but I tweeted this out and I will stand by it. I will make a video on camera of me eating a jar of mayo if by the end of the 2027 season, Arvell Reese is not an edge player for this team. I would be stunned if that is not the Giants' plan, and I would be stunned if Arvell Reese didn't communicate with the Giants, hey, I'll play some linebacker for you early on, but I saw what Will Anderson got paid. I worked my ass off to put 10 pounds on in this pre-draft process to become an edge rusher. That's what I want to do. I don't want you to draft me and just make me a linebacker. That's literally taking what I want to make and what I want to accomplish in my career and getting, 40 cents on the dollar out of everything. So I would be stunned if the long-term plan is not Arvell Reese to eventually become an edge rusher. And that's what the Giants' plan should be here. But again, the fact that he can play linebacker right away is awesome and makes their front all the more explosive and fun. And I think in an LB2 role, he can absolutely do that with his traits. And then on top of all of that, I would be remiss if I didn't at least bring up the fact that, Arvell Reese making that transition to edge eventually, while he plays linebacker, in practice, they can get him some time to pick the brain of Abdul Carter and Brian Burns, who is a craftsman and totally a great leader and a mentor type. Like, really a couple of fun players and perfect players to pair Arvell Reese with as he eventually learns the art of rushing the passer so that he's ready to do that by the time the Giants inevitably ask him to switch to more of an edge role. This is almost exactly how the Giants did, the Cowboys did things with Micah Parsons. So I know it was a bit of a surprise, and it's a crowded room being an edge room, but I like this process for the Giants. It's a true BPA pick, and I think if 2 years from now, if they get a second-round pick for Brian Burns or a pair of thirds or whatever, and they clear up some cap space there, and Thibodeau's gone because they didn't want to reach an extension with him, and you're sitting there and you have like two Micah Parsonses, like that's insane because Carter looked great in year one, underratedly so. I think Arvell Reese's potential is through the roof. Sometimes you got to just take who you think is the best player in the draft, and things will work itself out in time. So I am a fan of that. I gave that pick an A. And then Francis Maui-Noa as well, to get him at 10. Look, if you had to trade Dexter Lawrence, which I had some people asking me to at least discuss the Dexter Lawrence trade because I was out for a family dinner when it happened, and the draft was a couple days ago, so I didn't really get time to react to the Dexter Lawrence trade. But I would just say they got, probably even more than I expected them to get for Dexter Lawrence, who was going to command a new contract wherever he landed, who's coming off a down year last year. But yeah, if you had to trade Dexter Lawrence after things just kind of went awry with conversations there and things just kind of spoiled in the locker room, generally speaking, if you run things to the point where you have to trade Dexter Lawrence, one of the best players in football, that's not good for your football team. Like, this is still a better team with Dexter Lawrence on it than with Francis Maui-Noa on it. However, this is definitely making up some value. You get, to me, the best tackle in the draft with that 10th pick, which was always going to, they were always going to have potential to get a great player with that pick. So if you had to trade Dexter Lawrence, it was a no-brainer. But yeah, Maui-Noa was who I wanted for them at 5. So for things to play out here where you now have Arvell Reese in the mix after you lost a key D-line piece, obviously a different position, but you lost a key piece in Dexter Lawrence, and then you get the guy I wanted you to take at 5 anyway in Maui-Noa, that was really exciting to see, and it was definitely a ring the bell, I guess I told you so moment for me to Giants fans. I got a lot of Giants fans saying, why would you take Maui-Noa instead of Vega Wane? We don't even need offensive line. Like, we got so much better. Like, we've got Greg Van Roten coming back, 36-year-old Greg Van Roten coming back. That's why you don't want to take a guard. But I always said this, like, Maui-Noa is perfect for this team because he has been open and honest about, like, look, I'm going to come in, I'm going to win one of the 5 starting jobs on the offensive line. I don't care if it's tackle, I don't care if it's guard. Some guys want to stick at tackle. Maui-Noa is like, I don't really care. Like, just put me somewhere, let me kick some ass. And I think he's probably an even higher upside guard than he is a tackle, but I think he really has a balanced profile that could play both. And the reason I like Maui Noa more than even Vega Wane, who I do think was the best offensive lineman in the draft, but a guard-only offensive lineman, and not that that would have been a bad pick for the Giants, far from it, but the tough reality of this situation is Andrew Thomas, who I love, is a walking injury bug. And he has gone down 3 straight years. And if that's going to happen, not only do you need an immediate answer to step in, but you got to start having some questions if you want to keep him around as a franchise tackle, if you can only get half a season from him every year. So the flexibility for him to be, for me, like neck and neck, like right behind Vega Wane as a guard prospect and one of the best linemen in this draft as a guard, to get that and just become an ass-kicking offensive line, like this is going to be one of the best offensive lines in the league. But also to have that flexibility for Andrew Thomas. And hell, Jermaine Illuminor, really good right tackle. I think he's 32 years old. Was a 2 or 3 year extension for him. He's 31 and turns 32 at the end of the year. I think there's definitely a path where 3 years from now, Maui Noa kicks back out to tackle, and that's just a seamless transition. So huge fan of where the Giants went, positionally speaking, edge rush, tackle. Hard to argue with getting the players that they got with the 5th and the 10th pick, in my opinion. So A grades for both of those. Then they do get their cornerback there at the top of the 2nd round. It's about where I had Colton Hood. I'm curious to see how this goes because they are going to be that McDonald's system. They're going to be that off-zone, split safety, quarters-oriented defense. And, Colton Hood played mostly press man, line up in front of the wide receiver and jam them and run with them and don't really worry about zone too much. Not that they never ran off-zone coverage, but, Colton Hood got a lot of first-round buzz, and I couldn't quite get there with Colton Hood because I just think the zone stuff is behind the 8 ball right now. So I don't know that he's going to start for them right away. We'll see. Like, they have some temporary Band-Aids out there, guys like Greg Newsome, for example. But there's no doubt that he can run press man coverage, and typically coaches will say it's, give me the guy that can play man coverage. I'll teach him how to play zone. It could take a little bit of time, but certainly now 5 picks into the 2nd round, I can get behind Colton Hood. I think the potential is really good, but it is at least worth bringing up that the scheme fit is in question with this player. But hopefully they can make that work, and the player's good enough to learn some new stuff. Then with the 10th pick in the 3rd round, the Giants actually trade up big time here. They give, I think, ultimately 3 4th-round picks, 2 in this draft and 1 in next year's draft, to come up inside the top 75 to take Malachi Fields. So they paid a big price in terms of a bunch of picks. The value on it was fine, honestly, looking at it. And I don't think Malachi Fields was going to make it to them. And Malachi Fields does bring what they need in this wide receiver room in a way that I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, you could have just kept your picks and stayed put and taken Brennan Thompson or Kevin Coleman or, Skylar Bell. Like, clearly they wanted that big X wide receiver, someone that's going to run block for this team that I think is going to be an excellent running football team. And honestly, one of the biggest winners of this entire draft was our guy Cam Scadaboo, not getting replaced by Jeremiah Love, getting not just one, but another offensive lineman that we have yet to talk about in J.C. Davis, potentially in front of him. Malachi Fields, what he's going to do for their run game does matter. But when you look at their wide receiver room, like, okay, they have their alpha. They have their number one that they'll funnel this offense through in Malik Neighbors. They have a bunch of vertical threats. They have Darius Slayton, Darnell Mooney, Calvin Austin, all very small wide receivers. What they don't have is someone that be a chain mover to catch tough balls in the short to intermediate game and block their ass off. And I actually love how Malachi Fields fits into this offense. And I agree with them being a little aggressive to target this guy who I don't think they were going to get. And there's just not that many guys with this archetype that you can find. I mean, honestly, the closest guy other than Malachi Fields to being able to play this role for them, I don't think Ted Hurst is physical enough to do that. You're probably looking all the way down to maybe Michael Sturdivant all the way down the board there, but that's not nearly the stability that a Malachi Fields does. So I actually am totally fine with them being aggressive to get this piece into their wide receiver room. And when I look at what they did now, this is one of my favorite hauls in the first 2 days of the draft. Then you get to day 3, and the first pick there, someone I didn't get to, Bobby Jamison Travis out of Auburn. He was on my radar as a big, nose tackle. So that with their first pick on day 3, waiting all the way till the 6th round for that, they get a nose tackle replacement for Dexter Lawrence. Not someone that's going to be Dexter Lawrence, but can play zero tech and drop into the middle of that D line and hopefully take up some space. Decent enough pick, in my opinion. But I really liked getting J.C. Davis as well. Honestly, I see this as a steal. He was my number 9 offensive tackle in this draft, and shout out to the commenter, by the way, who in the NFC North video said, hey, I'd love to see the positional ranking for these guys on the graphic as well. So there you go, J.C. Davis. 3rd round grade for me, J.C. Davis. They get him in the 6th round, and he really brings a lot of positional flexibility as well. He reminds me a decent amount of Anthony Belton, who the Packers took in the 2nd round last year. I think Belton's a little bit stronger, but the same idea where it's like, dude, this guy is strong as hell, good tape in the Big Ten, played left tackle at Illinois, but I think has really a good projection as a guard. I think as immediate depth, this is awesome because he can be that kind of 6th man of the year type if you want him to be. Like if Maui Noah is looking like a Pro Bowl guard in year 1 at right guard, and you like what you've seen from J.C. Davis going against all these incredible edge rushers that you have in this room, and Andrew Thomas does get hurt, I wouldn't be stunned if they say, let's not rock the boat with Maui Noah as a rookie, our big investment. Let's stick J.C. Davis out there and see how he can hold up as a tackle. There's a lot of Jermaine Illuminor in J.C. Davis's game as a potential long-term replacement for Illuminor at right tackle. He could be your long-term left guard. Like there's so many routes where J.C. Davis becomes a starter for this team, even if it's 2 years from now and you're just a really good swing backup for the first couple of years. That's remarkable value in the 6th round. So really like that. And then they go Jack Kelly, the next pick, linebacker out of BYU. There's honestly a lot of Micah McFadden in his game, so Giants fans will be familiar with that, but a linebacker that was really just placed in a head-hunting north and south type of role where he was blitzed on about 1/5 of his snaps. So in terms of like run diagnostics and zone coverage IQ and that kind of stuff, like still a long way to go, but he's a really good athlete, a lot of developmental upside. I think as a backup and a special teamer early for sure, but maybe someday once you do move Arvell Reese out to edge, the idea is, okay, once Jack Kelly's kind of learned the system and develops as a backup for a couple years, we now have a potential starter down the road. I wouldn't be stunned if that happens with Jack Kelly. It's maybe not likely, but certainly possible with his tools and the way he kind of gets after it. So really like that pick. And then they end up with Thaddeus Dixon as well, kind of the only undrafted free agent that stood out to me for them. Not the tradesiest guy, but a really balanced corner, played for Bill Belichick. I think could be certainly depth at corner, probably practice squad year 1, but maybe climbs up and fills out, makes the 53 someday. But final grade there is an A for the New York Giants. Honestly, there was a couple drafts here that I struggled with between A and A+, between the Giants and the Eagles. Could have gone either way on that one, but probably both will finish around the top 5 for my final draft grades here. So that is going to do it for the NFC East. Again, I'm working on one of these a day. We're releasing them a little bit slower than I normally do for a reason, and that is to just give them a little bit more time to breathe. A lot of people are dropping draft grades, so like I know you guys are busy binging other people's content. These videos are not short, and we're gonna change the pacing of these this year, and it's better for me as well. I get to take more time with these grades, and I think release higher quality draft grades as well on top of everything. So we are going to go on to the AFC East next. That'll be out tomorrow evening. So please do subscribe so you don't miss that when it drops. We are just about to hit my goal of 115K subscribers, so I'd really appreciate you guys if you could sub there. Let me know your comments down below, where you agree, where you disagree with the analysis here from this one. What grades would you give these teams here? But until the next one, thank you for watching, and we'll talk soon. Cheers.